Hi there. Hope you're doing really well today, and welcome to this open class episode. We have 3 messages that we will go over today. As always, nothing is medical advice, just general thoughts, comments that I hope will help everyone that tunes in. Of course, especially the person that sent a message to us. So we'll jump in just a second, but today I actually want to say what I usually say in the end of the videos first, which is if you like the teaching generally on this channel and it gives you everything you need to arrive at a place where you feel you sleep well for the rest of your life, that is amazing. Nothing would make me happier. But if you'd like a little bit of help on the path there, connecting the dots, if you'd like to work with a coach, etc., do head over to sleepcoachschool.com. You can find an option that is great for you. With that said, let's jump in here and look at some questions from the community. First, we have one that is from Grace. Let's read this. Hi, Daniel. I took your course on BedTyme after 2 months of horrible sleep, 3 to 4 hours per night on average, combined with a ton of sleeping pills. After completing your course, I've slept 2 months every night for at least 8 hours in different cities, hotels, Airbnbs. It's been awesome. The past 3 nights all of a sudden have not been good. I've been tossing and turning until the middle of the night. I feel myself getting worried despite everything I've learned. Is this normal? And if so, what is your advice to help get me back on track and out of my own head? Thanks so much, Grace, for submitting this question to Open Cloud. And actually, Grace I've actually already been in contact with Grace, who joined the immunity program, and I think got a very helpful response within the Slack group there, or Slack channel there. But that said, I think this is such an important topic. It is a super, super common topic. In fact, anyone who is in this place that Grace is in, learned a lot about sleep, got to a place where there's no struggle whatsoever, sleep was happening easily, but then there's a little bit of a speed bump, then do check out the latest playlist we have here, which is the Speed Bumps playlist. It is in the description of all the newer videos. Currently there are, I think, 3 videos there, especially like episode 407. I think got a lot of positive responses there. So I think the first thing I want to say is that having these speed bumps is extremely normal. It is extremely normal. If someone does not have a speed bump, then to me that's almost kind of like, it almost makes me doubt that this person really had insomnia to begin with, because insomnia, and I mean to talk about this more actually, this is an important topic that I mean to talk about more, but insomnia is not about sleep. It is actually not about sleep. It sounds kind of crazy, right? But it is not about sleep. It is about fear and anxiety. And to kind of illustrate what I mean by that, I want to share that I've had many clients who have actually slept well, or slept without struggle for like weeks, but are still worried. They still are kind of in this place of some fear and anxiety and worry that what if it happens again? And even though there's no struggle at night with sleep, they don't have that nice quality of life because there's still that fear present. On the flip side, you have somebody who sleeps a lot, somebody who's maybe not in a good place, a little bit depressed, sleeping like many, many hours, but still feels tired, feels like hopeless, etc., etc. And what I want to illustrate with this is that when you have trouble sleeping, it seems very straightforward that I sleep very little and I want to sleep more, and when I sleep more, that's it, I'm done, right? But in reality, it's not about sleep. You can sleep little and still be very happy, active, have a great life. You can sleep a lot and still have a lot of struggle. And where you want to be is actually a place of no struggle. And to get to a place of no struggle, to arrive at that place, it is a journey of learning, of understanding, but which leads to less fear, less worry, less anxiety, and freedom. All right. And the reason I went there was to say that it can be confusing because it can seem like, again, the goal is to sleep a bunch, but the goal is actually, if anything, I don't really like the word goal, but where you want to arrive is a place where there's no fear. And so back to speed bumps, and now trying to connect this with the speed bump I talked about too, and why it's so normal to have speed bumps is this. Having insomnia is a place of fear. You're afraid of not sleeping. You're afraid of what will happen if you don't sleep. You're afraid of being awake. And fear just doesn't go away in a linear or predictable fashion. If you've had, so one way to think about this is that you can think of having had this struggle with sleep as like a traumatic event, as you were attacked by a bulldog, and that was really, really scary. It was traumatic. That event was traumatic. Well, guess what? Once that happened, it will take a while before you start seeing that it was just kind of a random thing. Most dogs are really friendly and nice, and it's not really beneficial to you to be afraid of dogs, generally speaking, right? But we can see that it's very normal. So even months after this event with the bulldog, when you see a dog, you will have some fear. There will be a little speed bump, we can call it there. And it's the same thing with insomnia, right? Even after weeks, months, there can still be some completely normal fear present. So I just want to point out that residual fear, having that for quite some time, is completely normal. Now, what often happens is like in Grace's case, that there's maybe something new happens, maybe some stressor, or maybe it's completely random. Maybe it's just this thought pops up again that kind of, what if I can't sleep? What if this happens again? The residual fear kind of pops up, completely normal. And then that can, of course, translate to a night or two of little sleep. Now, the key to me here is this, that insomnia from the very beginning was it came from resistance. It came from 1 or 2 nights or whatever when little sleep happened, and then there was resistance. Like, I don't want this to continue. I have to do something. I have to make sure I sleep. I have to take action, right? And the more you take action and try to force yourself to sleep, the more you try to run away from this idea of a threat, this perceived threat, this fake threat that really doesn't exist, the more trouble you have. So the resistance to not sleeping, kind of like I have to sleep, that resistance is what causes insomnia in the first place. And when you have a speed bump, which is completely normal, then it's all a question about resistance again. If you go towards like, this is unacceptable, I can't have a speed bump, I can't have this prolonged, what if this happens again, what if this goes on, what can I do to nip this in the bud? What can I do to prevent myself from going back where I was? What can I prevent myself from going backwards? How can I prevent this? That's the resistance. That is the resistance that potentially can lead to a little bit of more trouble. But when you face this speed bump and you see this, you see like, aha, my brain now is kind of starting to go to a place where it's trying to come up with a way of preventing me from being awake. It's trying to come up with a way to control sleep and resist, this discomfort that I'm experiencing. When you see this, then it becomes much easier, more natural to say, I see this as normal. I understand why this speed bump is happening, and I don't really need to resist this. What led me to sleeping well in the first place was becoming less resistant, becoming like, okay, if I don't sleep so much tonight, I can't control that. That's okay. I'll be okay. Abandon the resistance, you abandon the struggle, and you sleep well. And the same applies when you have these normal speed bumps. And by the way, for every time you have like one of these speed bumps, you learn something. You learn that you were still safe. There was no actual danger. And they become milder and milder and more spaced out as you go along. And they really are an important part of getting to a place where, it won't bother you again. Like the next time Grace has a speed bump, she may very well be like, oh, this is a speed bump. I don't really need to do anything. It becomes very, 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 it becomes just a blip, really. So, okay, so a little speed bump education there. I hope it made sense to you, Grace, if you're tuning in, and anyone else, of course, as well. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we talked about this in quite a lot of detail. So let's move on here and check out a question from Jenna. Let's read this. Hi, Coach Daniel. My name is Jenna. I'm a 19-year-old girl from Massachusetts who's majoring in forensic psychology from home. I have to say, I find your videos very reassuring to watch at night, but still have an onset of insomnia that started on August 6th. My routine, by the way, very glad to hear that you find them reassuring. My routine got thrown off in a way it hadn't in about 2 weeks, and I haven't been able to sleep the same. Last night, I got 0 sleep at all. In the past week, I've slept for very little, if at all. I remember having a few dreams, but they're not like they always are. My dreams are usually longer and involve things such as like roller coaster friends, aliens, whimsical creatures traveling. Lately, they've been less vivid and about diseases. I've even developed a fear of the night. My dad is the opposite of me. He's nearly a narcoleptic and sleeps all day. I've always been a great sleeper, averaging 6 or 7 hours. My pattern was that I would wake up at 4 and then fall back to sleep. I know I really wish that I never found out what fatal insomnia was, because ever since I fell down the rabbit hole, I have had worries about it. I know you get a million of these questions a day, but how likely is it? Do you think I would have it? I've been having this worry on and off since 2020. Sadly, when I was 17, I made the mistake of reading the terrifying Wikipedia article on it. The familial form is ruled out because I have a ginormous family and no one has ever had it. My mom even did ancestry, and I went genetic testing for other reasons when I was little. I'm convinced that reading about it has given me the sporadic form. What do you think is likely? All right. So Jenna, first and foremost, thanks so much for sending us this question, and also, as I always say, like, nothing here is medical advice. Anyone concerned about your health, talk to your doctor. But that said, staying on the topic of sporadic fatal insomnia, it is not something that, okay, here's my understanding. It's not something that anybody can give themselves. Like, we can't do anything to produce this form of disease. A lot of times people are worried, like, have I had so much trouble sleeping, so much insomnia that I have produced sporadic fatal insomnia in myself? That's impossible. Have I convinced myself that I have it and now I have it because I made myself have it? That is impossible. That's not possible. You can't make yourself have this. So that's kind of one thing that is, I think, is important to take note of. And the second thing, which is, I think, maybe much more important, is that insomnia means that we sleep a little, or we have a struggle with sleep because we are worried. We have fear. It's fear-driven. So we are worried that something is wrong with us. We're worried that we have a disease. We're worried about our health. We are worried about how we will function tomorrow if we don't sleep. These type of fears, this fear produces trouble sleeping. And of course, the fear of having sporadic fatal insomnia can produce a lot of trouble sleeping. So insomnia is a process driven by fear, which is not at all the case with SFI, or sporadic fatal insomnia. If anyone wants to tune into a very important conversation I had with Casper, whose mom passed away, we can see that there was absolutely no insomnia there. There was no wondering why she couldn't sleep. There was no taking sleeping pills. There was no experimenting with melatonin or supplement. There was no Googling sleep, things, or trying to figure out why she wasn't sleeping. There was no insomnia. And this is what I find reading like case reports and things like that too. SFI and FFI have nothing to do with insomnia. They have absolutely nothing to do with insomnia. I don't know whoever decided to call them that, but I think that was just a huge mistake. So to me, if somebody is worried about their sleep, that to me is a sure sign that they don't have SFI. And perhaps maybe even more importantly is that, like Casper said in that interview, is that if somebody has the wherewithal, the understanding, the capacity to go to YouTube and search for sporadic fatal insomnia, wonder if they have it, write a comment about it, then they don't, because at the time you're having some trouble, some symptoms of SFI, you're already at a place where you can't, like, your cognition is not at the place where you can do kind of complex things. So those are some words about that I thought were helpful. And then the other thing that struck me here was how, naturally, when we have any problem, when we humans have any type of problem, we want to solve the problem, right? And when that problem is that little sleep is happening, the brain, of course, tries to problem solve and figure out why this isn't happening. And so this message from Jenna we see a lot, like there's a lot of, Jenna shares a lot of things that I'm sure are shared as part of trying to understand what is going on. Like, Jenna's 19 years old. She's in Massachusetts. She studies this. Her dad sleeps a lot. She has a big family. And to me, like, all those details are kind of part of the brain's kind of problem solving to figure out what's going on. And the tricky thing to see is that, when it comes to insomnia, problem solving is the problem you're trying to solve by problem solving, not seeing that, problem solving is the problem. It's kind of tricky like that. But when you start seeing that, all this activity of trying to figure out what's happening is really why I'm so scared, or maybe that's not the best way to put it, but maybe like I should put it this way, that the fear produces all this problem solving, but in reality, the problem solving is in itself the problem, because it just creates the idea that there is a problem, that there is something that should be problem solved, etc. So when you start seeing this, you can start having like a completely different, I should say, relationship with these type of thoughts. When the brain goes like, you only had tomatoes yesterday, maybe that's why, then you can be like, oh, okay, there, my brain's problem solving again, and not take it so seriously, like not kind of get caught up with that narrative that the brain tries to produce and all the ideas it has and kind of detached from that. I think that can be really, really helpful. But I think that was really the main questions from Jenna. So let's take a look, make sure we didn't miss anything, and then we can head over to the last and next message. Jenna does share that things kind of got thrown off 2 weeks ago, and speed bump, we just talked about speed bumps. Check the speed bump a playlist can often help. The dream content, maybe we can comment on that as well. To me, the most common thing that I come across is when someone has like these vivid, bizarre, strange, intense dreams, doesn't even know, like it feels like I don't even know if I slept or not. It feels like time just skipped ahead. That to me is a description of hypersleep, which is simply that you are sleeping, but it's very infused by this hyperarousal, this hypervigilance, this kind of like heightened level of alertness type state is kind of mixed in with sleep. And that is very common, very normal, especially actually when you're in the process of learning. Oftentimes somebody goes from like having nights where they're completely aware of exactly how much they slept or didn't sleep, which is probably not 100% accurate, but you have this sense of like, I know exactly what's happening. I was awake the entire night. And then starts maybe, let's say, browsing this channel, learning more, and then goes from having that to like this hyper sleep where there's some sleep happening maybe, but they're not sure. And that's often a very helpful sign, actually, because you go from like intense fear where you're like aware of everything that's going on to like a little bit less fear where it's just like this kind of like hyperarousal again infused into sleep, and it makes things not pleasant, but more fuzzy. You don't exactly know what's happening, which is a nice sign. That's, hyperarousal, the fear overall is going down. And then you can have something different, which Jenna describes here, where the content of the dreams has shifted to like dreaming of diseases. And to me, like dream content often is just a reflection of kind of what we're thinking about during the day. It just spills over into dreams. So to me, I think that's the only thing to share there. I don't think it's strange if somebody thinks about something a lot, that kind of spills over into dreams too. Because often dreams are like, what happens at night is not entirely clear. Sometimes we're just thinking about this and we drift into a dream, but were we really dreaming, or was it just like thinking in a light type of sleep? It's hard to say, but anyway, just a few comments on that. So with that said, hope this helped, Jenna, and we will look at a message from Anita, who says the following. Hello, Coach Daniel. Thank you for your wonderful work. Anytime. So glad that you're here. I am struggling with the fact that it's easier for me to sleep in a room separate from the marital bedroom. On the one hand, I feel like I should do what I need to do to sleep, but I also believe that by doing so, I am missing out on the closeness of sleeping in the same bed as my spouse. Am I eroding sleep confidence by leaving the bedroom and sleeping elsewhere? Or am I doing what I should do to maximize sleep? Help! Thank you. Anytime, Anita. So glad that you're here. And I think I want to actually start with like one of the last sentences here was like, am I doing what I should do to maximize sleep? I think that one's important because it teaches us that someone, in this case Anita, has sort of a goal to maximize sleep. And that goal creates some trouble. It creates performance anxiety, to be more specific. And this goes back to kind of that, what I talked about, and you can maybe tell that I haven't completely developed this teaching yet, but insomnia seems to be about sleep, but it's more about fear, okay? And so when we have that goal of sleeping, maximizing sleep, it is not helpful because it really does nothing about what really is the thing, which is the fear and the anxiety. So let me illustrate this. So let's say you have a goal of like maximizing sleep, and by having that goal, you sort of automatically track and monitor your sleep, because if you have a goal to sleep a lot, then how would you know if you're reaching that goal or not if you're not tracking sleep, right? So you kind of like this goal creates an inherent problem, which is tracking. This, and kind of, now I'm going on a little sidetrack here, but that's also true. The one inherent problem of having a goal of maximizing sleep is that it leads to tracking, and tracking itself is a way to like pay more attention, to be more preoccupied, etc., etc. So okay, so it leads to tracking. We talked about that. Now, and why is this? What's another reason this is problematic is this: that if you have a goal of maximizing sleep, and you wake up in the morning and you check how much you slept, like either by recollection, or you do some math or something like that, or you have a tracker, and you slept very little, then your reaction becomes, oh no, that didn't work. Even if I slept on the couch, I hardly slept. What's wrong, And it leads to performance anxiety. You're thinking about, how can I improve my performance to reach that goal and maximize my sleep? And you can just feel like performance anxiety is not something that will lead you to have peaceful, restful sleep for the rest of your life, right? But what about if you wake up and you're like, I got it. I slept 7.5 hours. Isn't that kind of nice? No, it's not, because it leads to performance anxiety. Because the second you've been excited because you reach your goal, the next for a second you feel like great, and then the next second you're like, how did I do that? What did I do? I slept here, I used this, I didn't use that, I avoided this, I did that, and then so all this, of course, to repeat it, because now you achieved, you maximized sleep, and now you want to do it again, right? And of course, when you're trying to do it again by repeating all the things you do, so much pressure and anxiety and monitoring that you will not sleep, and then you're kind of back to frustration again. So again, when the goal is to maximize sleep, no matter what happens, if you sleep a little or a lot, it will just perpetuate the struggle. It will create performance anxiety. I think that's a very, very helpful one. And so then, you may wonder then, okay, so if that's not the goal, now what should my goal be? Well, there's several things that I think could help. I think generally having a goal of just understanding, for the purpose of learning and understanding, for no other reason than that it helps to understand what's happening to yourself, what's happening inside you, how your mind works. That's just kind of like general, good for life in general. I think that's a very reasonable goal. But I think there are another set of goals that can be even more helpful. And let me give you a rationale for these goals before I present them to you, which is this: that so much of the struggle we see when it comes to insomnia, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, all these things, is self-criticism. It is when you think that there's something wrong with you, that you're doing something wrong, that you can't get it right, that you shouldn't be where you're at, etc. All that is sort of, it's a form of self-criticism. The thing is that no human being can control their sleep or control their emotions or control their thoughts. It's just impossible. No human can do that. So when you set that as like a goal, again, a goal to sleep a certain amount, or not be anxious, or to feel this way, then very easily, when you don't achieve that goal, then you criticize yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? I know so much. I should be further along. I should be making more progress. This shouldn't be happening. That's all just self-criticism. And it's just as logical to criticize yourself for not being able to sleep in a certain bed, not being able to do this and that. It's just as logical to criticize yourself for that as to criticize yourself for not being able to turn your hair color pink by willpower. Like, it's just as logical. Like, if I tried really, really hard to turn my hair color pink and it's still not pink, then, you know, should I go like, what's wrong with me? Why couldn't I do that? Of course not. It doesn't make any sense. And it makes just as much sense to criticize yourself for not being able to sleep or things like that. So with that said, I think some really helpful goals are related to this. For example, a goal of like, I can be kind to myself even if I've been really anxious. You know, I think that's a great goal. It's sort of like a goalless goal because it leads to kind of nothing, like just kindness. Another one is I can have a sleepless night without criticizing myself for it. I think that's a really nice goal. So if you kind of like, if anyone wants to track or monitor anything, I think this helps. Like just keeping a little tab of like how kind you were to yourself, how kindly you treated yourself, how kindly you spoke to yourself, and that can really lead in a nice direction. I really believe that. Okay, so now to the actual question here, which is, okay, as is so common, Anita has slept in a different, you know, apart from her husband, but is thinking maybe this isn't the best thing to do. Maybe this is leading to like this erosion of confidence. And that leads us to like a short discussion here about confidence. So, you know, there are two ways to think about confidence, and one I think is not very helpful, one is quite helpful. When you think about someone who sleeps well and you ask them like, you know, what do you do to sleep so well? You sort of get the secret to sleeping well, which is that person will go like, I don't know. So this person has absolutely no confidence in their ability to sleep. In fact, if you'd ask someone who has never struggled with sleep, like, how confident are you that you'll sleep tonight? That person will kind of just go like, they won't even understand the question because they've never thought about sleep in that way, that it's an ability or a skill or anything like that. So the question kind of doesn't make any sense. So this person has no confidence. They don't have any confidence in anything. It's just like they don't have any confidence in their breathing, you know, or their digestion, you know, and they don't have any confidence in sleeping either. It just, there's nothing there. And this is helpful because when you think that you need to be confident in your ability to sleep, you're on a path towards some struggle because you're trying to make yourself believe something, make yourself think something, and whenever you try to force some belief or idea kind of onto yourself, then there's going to be friction and resistance and trouble and struggle. So I think the first point here is that when you see that no confidence, conviction, belief is required for sleep to happen. Sleep is something like breathing. It just happens all by itself. And you sort of abandon any attempt of having confidence in that sense, having confidence to sleep, or if you abandon any worries about eroding the confidence in your ability to sleep, if you just kind of abandon that whole concept of confidence in that sense, that's really helpful. So abandoning confidence in your ability to sleep, very helpful because, you know, we talked about why. Now, what's the other way you can look at confidence? Well, you can also look at confidence as being confident that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken or damaged or anything like that. I'm just a normal person having a completely normal experience in the context of some misunderstanding in the brain, right? So insomnia is a misunderstanding in the brain. The brain thinks that there's some danger, that it's dangerous to be awake at night. And this leads to a lot of experiences like, you know, being up a lot, like having palpitations, you know, having fear, having anxiety, sadness, hopelessness, frustration. All this comes from just that simple misunderstanding. But when you have confidence in the fact that there's nothing wrong with me, that I think helps. That does help. That is very helpful. So to go sort of, I guess we're kind of going backwards in this message here from Anita. Have I eroded my sleep confidence by sleeping elsewhere? I think, again, like in a way, it's hard to answer that question because the type of confidence we're talking about here, the confidence to kind of make yourself sleep, is kind of a non-thing. It's best to just abandon that. Now, have you created, by sleeping elsewhere, have you created some idea that maybe there's something wrong with you? That's possible. I mean, that can happen. But again, I don't think it's important whatsoever. I think what is more important is to explore why it is often easier to sleep outside your own bedroom, and also how to approach this when you have slept outside of your bed or your bedroom for a while, and you're wondering maybe you should go back there or maybe not, kind of that thing. So if we start with exploring, like, why is it that I see I have some live questions here, by the way. Oh, hi, it's Jake. Cool. Jake, I'll be on the live questions in a second, but let's complete this thought process in relation to Anita's message. So why is it that it's often easier to sleep elsewhere? Well, it is simply because there's less pressure. That it's as simple as that. When you go to bed in your own bed, in your bedroom next to your spouse, then you are at the place where you want to sleep. That's also the place where you should sleep, where it is normal to sleep, where people sleep in general, right? So this is where you want to sleep. This is where you desire to sleep and hope to sleep, right? And you can see that tension, friction, pressure from being normal, from sleeping where everybody sleeps, from that leads to some struggle. Now, on the flip side, if you go to a couch or a spare bed, well, there's less pressure there, because if you don't sleep in a spare couch, if you're awake the whole night in a spare couch, well, that's not as problematic, because that's actually not where you should sleep, or where it's normal to sleep, or where you really want to sleep. So as always, the more pressure to sleep, the less sleep. When there's less pressure to sleep, sleep happens easier, right? So again, paradoxically, when you're in an environment where it's okay to be awake, like it's more okay for you to not sleep in the couch, it's more okay for you to not sleep in an extra bed, then it happens easier, right? So now we talked about why it's often easier to sleep in a spare bed or something like that, because there's less pressure to sleep there. So now we've seen that, the question becomes, okay, so let's say someone who hears this, has been sleeping in a spare bed, and sleep happens a little easier there. Should you just continue to sleeping in the couch, or should you go back to bed? And I think perhaps the most important here is to talk about idealism, that it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, if someone sleeps here or there or some other place, like, why does that? It really doesn't matter at all, except when when there's conflict. Okay, so if someone is completely comfortable with sleeping on a couch for the rest of their lives, then there's no problem with sleeping on a couch for the rest of their life, right? But on the flip side, when that same person is like sleeping a little easier on the couch, but feels conflicted about it, guess what? We already have tension. We already have friction, because there's like these two conflicting wants. On one hand, I want to sleep well. On the other hand, I want to sleep in my bed. I'm sleeping well, but I'm on my couch. I want to sleep in my bed. There's friction there. There's already friction there. So if there is friction there, if there's this conflict, then you will not sleep really well, even if you're on your couch or in a spare bed, because that's not where you want to sleep. Okay. So I think, when there is conflict, friction, tension like this, then of course it helps to change something. And there's two things in this scenario. When you're sleeping easier in the couch, but you want to sleep in your bed, there's two ways to change this scenario, if you will. One is to change your ideas around sleeping on a couch, and one is to change where you sleep. And so you can change your idea around sleeping on the couch and say, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with sleeping on a couch. Why should I judge myself for sleeping on a couch? There's really no reason to do that. I can be kind to myself, deploy self-compassion, and see that it's totally fine. And then you can sleep well forever in a couch or spare bed or wherever it is. But as you can probably sense as I'm saying this, that's for most people, this is not going to be true. Most people are not going to find themselves kind of being fine with sleeping on couch for their survival. Most people will still have the friction. So for most people, it does make sense to change where you sleep. Okay. But again, it's not like whenever you think of something is important, I must do this. This is crucial. That's not helpful. But we're looking at it as like, I prefer sleeping in my bed with my husband, and therefore I'm going to do that, right? And here's the thing, like, let's say you decide that, yeah, this all rings true. There's really no reason there's no reason I couldn't sleep well next to my husband. And the reason I haven't is because I felt this pressure to sleep there. And so let me do that. Let me go sleep next to my husband. What often can happen here is that we have what's called a change reaction. And the change reaction is the following. So insomnia is really, again, we talked about this, like it's a problem. It's a state of fear, anxiety, problem solving. And the brain naturally, when it has believed for some time that there is a threat, there is a problem, something can happen that is going to harm me, something like that, it's in this kind of like, it's in a reactive state, let's call it that, reactive state. And it can react to anything, even something that is like very, very kind of logical and in a wise decision to just, I've decided that I'm going to sleep next to my husband and I just want to do that. So that's what I'm going to do. It's a perfectly logical, kind of nice, decision. But guess what? It's still a change. It's still a change. Something has changed. And when the brain is in this kind of reactive state and there's any type of change, it can go like, what's going to happen? What if I don't sleep? What if I shouldn't have done that? Maybe I should have stayed on the couch. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I shouldn't do that. And that reactivity, if you will, can often create some trouble sleeping. So what can happen is that you decide I'm going to sleep next to my husband in my bed, and then you hardly sleep at all. And that's completely normal. Completely normal. It's just a change reaction. And I think the answer to that is just to know that it's completely normal to have this. And if you just allow it to happen, you don't think of it as strange or unusual, then you'll see that you can sleep well anywhere. And that can be really relieving when you're like, after some time, when this change reaction kind of settles in, you're like, oh, I slept a little bit better, even though I was next to my husband. Okay, that's nice, and then that teaches you that, you can sleep out everywhere. And by the way, if you have like a lot of struggle and you decide to go back on the couch, that's totally fine too. It's like totally fine. Don't judge yourself for that. And you can, again, make a choice from freedom, and you can decide to do whatever you want then. But generally speaking, I think it helps to sort of make a decision that, okay, I'm going to sleep next to my husband no matter what. Even if I have a lot of struggle, this is where I want to sleep. And then things get easier and easier. It's kind of like when we doubt our decisions and we think like, maybe I should have done that, maybe I should have done that kind of like that creates some tension and pressure, etc. But yeah, as you can see, a lot to learn from even a kind of short message here. But Anita, I hope that makes sense. And with that said, let's jump to Jake's live questions here. Jake says, hi, Daniel. I left a question in open class today for the first time in a month. I feel like I've entered the pit again. I made a decision last night to just sit with my anxiety and accept it. Rather than attempt to solve it by spending hours on your channel compulsively watching videos, I barely slept last night. Whether this was residual anxiety keeping me up, I don't know, but it's hard. Not to think, here we go again, thanks. Yeah, I think to me it's like, of course, thanks for being here and sharing this, Jake. And I think there's so much insight here. Well, first of all, we can see that it's been very many months since you submitted a question to open class. That says a lot. And also this insight that, okay, sometimes I'm here kind of watching videos not to just learn, but to escape anxiety, to kind of like to get away from that feeling I have, like to sort of like, to buffer, if you will. And when you have that, when you see that, you can make a choice from a position of freedom that maybe when you find yourself like, oh, I have to watch a video because I don't want to feel this way, then it can help you say like, maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I'll just sit with the feelings I have. And by the way, sometimes people tell me like, I did what you told me, Daniel. I was like, I just sat with my emotions, I accepted them, but I was still super anxious, or I still didn't sleep at all. Well, then, that just shows that, listening to our emotions and being with them and sitting with them had turned in a way into an effort of getting rid of them, which is sort of the opposite of sitting with them. So that can just be helpful to know. But I think, and again, I barely slept last night. Again, when we think of that as just what do you call it? Like a cause and effect. Like I was quite anxious, therefore I didn't sleep. Nothing strange or usual about that. I think that helps. But when we go into like, why did that happen? Was it this? Was it that? Then there can be a little bit more struggle. Now, but I think what was maybe what I thought could be helpful here is to talk about this one. It's hard, but it's hard not to think, here we go again. And I think when you have this thought, like, here we go again, I'm going to go back into the rabbit hole, I'm going to have a lot of trouble sleeping again, that's totally normal. But we're thinking, I shouldn't think this. I have to stop myself thinking of this. It's harder not to think this way. Then we can see that we're sort of in that resistance again. We're trying to not think of something, which makes us think more about it. So when you have this feeling of like, okay, I'm going to have a lot of trouble again, I'm going down the rabbit hole again, then I think it's helpful to just see that, okay, these are some thoughts that are produced by my brain. It wants to keep myself safe always. But I don't really need to do anything about these thoughts. I don't need to try to push them away or modify them or change them. I can just let them be. I think that can really, really help. All right, so with that said, we will conclude this open class. I thank everyone for sharing what's happening and answering and submitting questions. And I'll be back with more very soon. And by the way, I think next week, Coach Michelle are going to do some open classes, which I think will be really helpful to get another perspective on things. So anyway, thanks so much for today. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.